I thought I had just scored the deal of a lifetime at a storage auction, but less than 24 hours later, a complete stranger knocked on my front door with $50,000 in cash and one terrifying request. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Take the money, and never open the last box." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. My name is Ryan, I'm 32, and I've been flipping storage units for extra money for almost 4 years. Most units are boring. You find old furniture, broken TVs, family photo albums, or boxes full of clothes that nobody wants. Every once in a while, though, you find something valuable enough to make a decent profit. That Saturday morning, about 30 people showed up at a storage auction just outside Dallas. The first 6 units were exactly what everyone expected, mostly junk, but then they rolled up the door on Unit 47. It looked almost empty. There was an old wooden desk, 3 dusty filing cabinets, a leather chair, and 12 identical black plastic containers stacked neatly against the back wall. Nobody seemed interested because there wasn't anything flashy like motorcycles or expensive tools. The auctioneer started the bidding at $100. A couple of people bid, but they quickly lost interest. I won the entire unit for $200. Everyone congratulated me, mostly because they assumed I'd overpaid for someone else's trash. I rented a small trailer and hauled everything back to my garage. The desk was solid oak, worth maybe $400. The leather chair cleaned up nicely. Even the filing cabinets were in good shape. I figured I'd easily double my money before I even opened the black containers. The first box was filled with old comic books. The second contained unopened baseball cards from the early 90s. The third held vintage cameras wrapped carefully in newspaper. Every box seemed more valuable than the last. I couldn't believe my luck. By the time I reached the 11th container, I'd already found enough collectibles to make at least $15,000. Then I noticed something strange. There was one final container sitting by itself in the corner. Unlike the others, it had a heavy steel padlock on it. There wasn't any label, no markings, nothing. I grabbed a pair of bolt cutters from my toolbox, but before I could cut the lock, my phone rang. The caller ID simply said unknown. I answered anyway. A call man's voice asked, "Did you buy Unit 47 this morning?" I froze. I hadn't listed anything online. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. I asked who he was, but he ignored the question and said, "Whatever you do, don't open the last box." Then he hung up. I stood there staring at my phone, trying to convince myself someone was messing with me. 10 minutes later, my doorbell camera sent me a notification. A black SUV had pulled into my driveway. A man wearing a gray suit stepped out carrying a black duffel bag. He smiled politely as I opened the door and said, "Mr. Carter, I'd like to buy something from you." I told him nothing was for sale. He unzipped the duffel bag just enough for me to see stacks of cash wrapped in bank straps. $50,000, he said. "You keep everything else from the storage unit. We only want the last box." My heart started pounding. I asked him what was inside it. He looked over his shoulder like he was making sure nobody was watching, then quietly replied, "You don't want to know." I laughed nervously and said, "If it's worth 50 grand, I definitely want to know." His smile disappeared. "No," he said, "you really don't." Then, before I could ask another question, another black SUV slowly drove past my house, but it didn't stop. It just kept circling the block. The man watched the black SUV circle the block before looking back at me and saying, "They're here already." I asked him who they were, but instead of answering, he zipped the duffel bag shut, placed it on my porch, and said, "Take the money, hand me the box, and this ends right now." Something about the way he said it made me realize he wasn't threatening me. He sounded scared. I told him I couldn't give him something I hadn't even opened yet. His face immediately changed. "That's exactly why they can't let you keep it." Before I could respond, both SUVs stopped at opposite ends of my street. 4 people got out, all dressed in black, and started walking toward my house. The man grabbed my arm and whispered, "Go inside. Lock every door." We rushed into the garage, and he slammed the door behind us. My heart was racing as he looked around the room until his eyes landed on the locked container. "Is that it?" he asked. I nodded. He picked it up, and for the first time I noticed how incredibly heavy it was. It was much heavier than the other containers. Before either of us could move, someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. Then another loud bang came from the back door. Whoever these people were, they weren't interested in being polite. The man looked at me and said, "Do you have another way out?" I pointed toward the side gate leading to the alley. He nodded and whispered, "Good. When I say run, don't stop." Another crash echoed through the house. It sounded like someone had kicked the front door open. I could hear footsteps moving across my hardwood floors. My stomach dropped. I had never been so terrified in my life. The man counted to 3, threw open the garage side door, and we sprinted into the alley. Behind us I heard someone yell, "They're running." We jumped into my pickup truck, and I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. 2 black SUVs immediately pulled out behind us. I looked in the mirror and couldn't believe this was happening over a storage unit. We flew through 2 red lights before the man finally spoke again. "They're not after you," he said. "They're after what's in the box." I shouted, "Then tell me what's inside." He stayed quiet for a few seconds before saying, "I don't know exactly, but I know people have died trying to get it." That answer only made everything worse. We kept driving until we reached an old shopping center with hundreds of parked cars. I quickly pulled behind an abandoned building and shut off the engine. The SUVs drove past without seeing us. For the first time in almost 10 minutes, everything was silent. The man took a deep breath and finally introduced himself. "My name is Daniel." I asked if he worked for the people chasing us. He shook his head. "I used to." He explained that years earlier he had worked as an accountant for a powerful criminal organization that laundered millions of dollars through fake businesses. Before disappearing, their former boss had hidden something inside a storage unit as insurance in case anyone betrayed him. Nobody knew which unit it was until it was accidentally sold that morning. I stared at the locked container sitting between us. "So you're telling me this box belongs to criminals?" Daniel nodded. "And now everyone who knows it exists is looking for it." Just then my phone buzzed. It was another unknown number. I answered carefully. A different voice calmly said, "Mr. Carter, this is your only warning. Open the box, and you'll never live long enough to tell anyone what you found." Then the line went dead. I slowly looked at Daniel. Neither of us said a word. We both knew there was only one thing left to do. We looked at each other for a few seconds before I grabbed the bolt cutters from behind my truck seat. Daniel immediately reached out and grabbed my wrist. "If you cut that lock, there's no going back." I pulled my hand away and replied, "There was no going back the moment someone kicked down my front door." I placed the container on the pavement behind the abandoned building, took a deep breath, and snapped the padlock. The metal hit the ground with a loud clang. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I slowly lifted the lid. Inside wasn't a pile of cash, gold bars, or diamonds. It was a thick black binder, 3 encrypted hard drives, several passports with different names but the same faces, and a small flash drive taped underneath the lid. Every document looked official. Bank statements, property records, handwritten notes, and photos of politicians, business executives, and people I recognized from television. Daniel's face went completely pale. "Oh no," he whispered. "This isn't money." "What is it?" I asked. "It's leverage." He explained that the binder contained years of evidence against dozens of powerful people. Bribes, fake companies, offshore accounts, secret payments, and enough information to destroy careers and send people to prison. Whoever controlled that evidence controlled everyone listed inside it. Before I could ask another question, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was my sister. I answered immediately. She sounded terrified. "Ryan." 2 men came by the house asking about you. They knew my name. They knew where Mom lives. Who are these people? Every drop of blood drained from my face. This wasn't just about me anymore. I told her to leave immediately, go somewhere public, and don't tell anyone where she was going. She kept asking what was happening, but I hung up before I could accidentally put her in more danger. Daniel looked at me and quietly said, "Now you understand why I wanted to buy the box." I stuffed everything back into the container and drove straight toward the nearest FBI field office. Halfway there, a black SUV appeared behind us again. Then another one pulled in front. We were boxed in. The front SUV suddenly slammed on its brakes. I barely avoided crashing into it. 4 men jumped out. One of them pointed directly at the container. "Hand it over." Nobody screamed. Nobody fired a gun. Everything was strangely calm. Daniel slowly opened his door and stepped out with his hands raised. "I'll give it to you," he said. The man smiled. I looked at Daniel in complete disbelief. Then Daniel winked at me. A second later he threw the container as hard as he could into the middle of the road. Everyone instinctively turned toward it. "Gio," he yelled. I floored the accelerator, swerved around the SUVs, and sped away while the men chased the container instead of my truck. In the mirror I watched them fighting each other over the same box. Daniel had tricked them. The real evidence wasn't inside anymore. While we were hiding behind the abandoned building, he'd secretly moved the flash drive into my backpack without saying a word. I reached behind my seat and felt it. The tiny flash drive was still there. Daniel smiled for the first time all day. "They're fighting over copies," he said. "They don't even realize you have the original." 20 minutes later we pulled into the FBI parking lot. Agents met us outside. Within hours, they copied everything from the flash drive and began asking questions that lasted until sunrise. Over the next few months, news reports started appearing almost every week. Executives resigned. Politicians were arrested. Businesses collapsed. Federal investigations spread across multiple states. The organization Daniel had worked for completely fell apart. As for the people chasing us, several were arrested. Others simply disappeared. I never saw any of them again. The FBI returned my truck a month later, repaired the damage to my house, and even helped recover most of the collectibles from the storage unit. I still made money on the auction. Just not the way I expected. Sometimes people ask me what the craziest thing I've ever found in a storage unit was. I usually smile and say, an old desk. Because the truth? Some discoveries are worth far more than money. And some are dangerous enough that you'd rather nobody believe the story at all. So, if someone offered you $50,000 to never open one locked box, would you take the money, or would curiosity win?